The Newburyport Custom House Maritime Museum was built in 1835. However, settlers landed in the town of Newbury in 1635, 200 years earlier. The Merrimack River was plentiful with fish, and lumber was found to be just as abundant. These commodities grew to be the base of the region's economy. As more and more goods were produced or caught, shipbuilding was on the rise. Over 100 vessels were built between 1681 and 1714. As enough goods were raised, Newbury began exporting fish and timber to the West Indies in return of molasses and sugar. A portion of this trade was sent to Europe, helping the route to be known as the Triangle Trade, the foundation for the New England economy. The maritime industry was growing rapidly, creating conflict between those who supported it and those who supported agrarian interests. This clash pushed to the creation of Newburyport in 1764. Newburyport continued on its maritime path and became the center of New England shipbuilding by the 18th century. Through all of this, the Custom House was built. Robert Mills, a prestigious architect at the time, designed the Custom House. He also designed the plans for many famous buildings, such as the Washington Monument and the United States Treasury Building. He also built the Robert Mills House in Columbia, South Carolina. Some of his signature contributions to the buildings can be seen in the Custom House, such as the vaulted ceilings and the cantilevered staircases. The Custom House was built to tax imported goods that came into port and to assist the progress of increasing overseas trade. Positions at the Customs House consisted of the collector, deputy collector, naval officer, surveyor, inspector, and boatman. During the Revolution, Newburyport's seaport was in decline, so the Customs House took on new roles. It began manufacturing women's shoes and storing submarine parts. Today, the Customs House plays roles as a maritime museum, an educational center, a meeting place, a research facility, and an events hall. The museum portion of the Customs House holds many maritime artifacts that help connect today to the past while preserving history. One can find model ships, old Coast Guard uniforms, recreational photographs of crew, and artifacts from excursions. The museum has 7 exhibits. One of these exhibits is the Coast Guard Room, holding models of Coast Guard ships, photos, and artwork. The Customs House Maritime Museum has many ties to the Coast Guard and its development. The Customs House is located in Newburyport, the birthplace of the Coast Guard, and is run by the Newburyport Maritime Society. The society was founded in 1968 with the sole role of restoring the building's 19th century nature. It communicated the role of the Merrimack Valley in American history while preserving and protecting its maritime heritage. In 2010, the Newburyport Maritime Society took special care in celebrating the birth of the Coast Guard. It received a grant to finance a succession of informational lectures, classes, and field trips to help increase knowledge of the Clipper City's contribution to American history among residents. Though the Coast Guard has ties to the museum nowadays, the two were also very connected during the American Revolution. The revenue cutters inspected and surveyed the ships that brought goods into the Newburyport area for the Customs House. The Customs House relied on the revenue cutters to collect the appropriate duties. In fact, the crew of such revenue cutters received their sailing orders from the customs collector of the Customs House. The U.S. Coast Guard was founded on August 4, 1790. However, in that time period, the Coast Guard was known as the Revenue Cutter Service, a department of the Treasury. The Revenue Cutter Service was created when the Tariff Act was put into effect. The act was issued by Alexander Hamilton in 1790, allowing the construction of 10 vessels to collect revenue on several items, and to enforce trade laws and hinder smuggling, ultimately to pay back the debts of the nation. The vessels fell under a specific type of sailing vessels, being a small deck ship, and were overall defined as any vessel pertaining to the Great Britain's Royal Customs Service. Revenue cutters began by intercepting slave ships that were illegally importing slaves into the United States. One of the most prominent interceptions of such slave boats was the La Amistad in 1839. While being transported from Havana to Puerto Principe, Cuba, Sangbe Pie, an African captive, led the 56 captives on board along with him in revolt. The captives were able to take control of the ship and demanded they be returned home. After agreeing, the captives secretly sailed the schooner along the North American coast, not at all in the direction of Africa. The United States Revenue Cutter Service intercepted the schooner and took the captives and their captors into custody. A court case was later issued in New Haven, Connecticut, ruling the Africans were transported illegally and would be freed. The captives were returned to Africa in 1842. Revenue cutters did not only intercept ships and smuggling, although these were their main duties. During wars, the service was allocated under the control of the United States Navy, and such cutters were often assigned to military service. During the War of 1812, the USRC Jefferson, a revenue cutter, captured a British merchantman, being the first American capture of an enemy ship. After the war, piracy broke out along the Gulf Coast as a result of weakened power of the British and Spanish in the Caribbean and the Gulf Coast. Revenue cutter ships were dismissed to fight the pirates. After years of beneficial service to the Navy, military, and overall success of the nation's trade, the revenue cutter service became the Coast Guard. On January 28, 1915, President Woodrow Wilson signed the act to create the Coast Guard. This act combined the revenue cutter service with the life-saving service to create the United States Coast Guard. Today's Coast Guard keeps the maritime economy and the environment at a stable point while protecting maritime borders and rescuing those in need of help. It serves as a multi-mission branch of the military holding 10 officer ranks. It's run by the Department of Homeland Security during peacetime but can be reassigned by the President or Congress to the Department of the Navy during war. The service has two parts that make up its mission set. These parts consist of maritime law enforcement mission and a federal regulatory agency mission. There are three divisions of roles under the Guard: maritime security, maritime safety, and maritime stewardship. Under these roles, missions are classified under Homeland Security missions and non-Homeland Security missions. Non-Homeland Security missions consist of overall safety rescue missions, navigational missions, and procedures involving ice and glaciers. The Coast Guard rescues about 5,500 people a year on average, but during situations such as Hurricane Katrina, over 30,000 people were saved. Homeland Security missions consist of border security, drug prohibition, and migrant prohibition. While the Army and other military services are called to work in preparation of a war or during a war, the United States Coast Guard is always on guard, facing missions every day. Their motto, Semper Paratus, meaning always prepared, exemplifies their work ethic and commitment to the United States. In conclusion, the Newburyport Custom House Maritime Museum contributed greatly not only to the development of the United States Coast Guard, but also to the development of Newburyport, Massachusetts, New England, America, and its relationship to the world.